Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting program coming up for you. We will be speaking with an ambassador who at one time was the American ambassador to Iraq. So this gentleman knows Iraq, he knows the Middle East, and he knows diplomacy. We will be asking him about the good old subject that we seem not to be able to shake off, and that is 9/11 and the war on Iraq that we pretended to tell the world that we are going there because Saddam had links to what happened in New York on that dark day of September 11, 2001. My guest, ladies and gentlemen, he was one of the first people to tell the Bush administration that they got it wrong. And if they think that going to Iraq will be a walk in the park, you don't know anything about war. And he even called, but way back in October of 2001, he basically called the war plans that we did have at that time as dumb. My guest is Ambassador Edward Peck. He served as the chief of mission in Baghdad, and he also served in Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. He was the ambassador, the United States ambassador to Mauritania. Now he's an advisory board member for the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute. And he was the deputy director of the Cabinet Task Force on Terrorism in the Reagan White House. So my guest knows everything that we need to know about terrorists, about terrorism, and about Iraq, because he served as the U.S. ambassador in Iraq at one time. He served as the U.S. ambassador to Mauritania, and he also held posts very much throughout the Middle East. So he knows the Arab world very, very well. And we're going to find out from him, why did we go to Iraq? Who pushed us to go? Were we prepared? Was this war good for us? What have we accomplished? And where are we going? And I'm sure you will enjoy listening to Ambassador Peck, as I have heard him on many interviews. And even though he's a diplomat, but he tells it just like it is. Sometimes you think politicians would have to skirt around the issues, but I guarantee you Ambassador Peck will tell it to you. If you like it, fine, which he hopes that you will like it, and if you don't, hey, there are other opinions out there. But without any further ado, let's go directly to Ambassador Peck. Welcome to the program, sir.
Sir, I'm honored.
Ambassador Peck, let me start with, there's a lot of things that we do need to speak about, and as someone who has the experience that you've had, especially in the Middle East and especially in the diplomatic channels, knowing the personalities in the Middle East and also knowing the personalities in the United States, I just wanted to ask you, why did you call the war plans back in October of 2001, just even a month after September 11, as dumb plans? And then we'll start with that, and we have a lot of questions for you.
Sure. Well, Dr. Hesham, I never said dumb. I think stupid was what I called it. And if I didn't, I should have. It was probably, I hope I'm wrong, sir. You have to understand. I think it was probably one of the dumbest things. Let's use that word. One of the dumbest things the United States has ever done, and we've done some pretty dumb ones, just like everybody else. But that is a catastrophe of potentially global proportions. That's my view, of course.
Okay. Now, you did serve in Iraq at a time when Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq. Have you met him personally?
I have not. I think it's important to remember that we did not have have specifically or particularly warm and productive relations with Iraq at that time. So that countries like the United States did not have access to or interface with the leadership the way the way I have had in other countries in the Middle East. Never met him, but I'm a trained observer. I know a lot about him from watching him on television and elsewhere. You get a lot of that, when you watch Iraqi television, you get to see the big guy. So I know him reasonably well, his personality traits, but I've never met him. No.
Now, how was he liked in Iraq? I'm sure you guys had a lot of intelligence sources running around the streets of Baghdad to kind of test the water there and test the temperatures to see how people think of Saddam. What was the general opinion of you and the United States intelligence as did people like Saddam? The Iraqi people?
Some did. I think it's safe to say, sir, that no leader in history has ever been as loved, admired, revered, and respected as he liked to think he was. And by the same token, he's never been as hated and reviled and despised as his enemies like to think he was. Saddam Hussein was a tough, village leader who rose to prominence in his country with a party, the Ba'ath Party, which had a lot of attributes about which Americans know very little. And I would tend to say that the majority of people were reasonably comfortable with the way things were because in those days, if you didn't bother the government had no reason to bother you. Very much the way it is in this country today, more or less. So that the people lived a good life. They had a high standard of living. They had a very, very successful building program of housing and schools and churches and all sorts of things that were going on from that perspective. And therefore, an awful lot of people were reasonably satisfied with the way things were, certainly compared to the way it is now.
So that was actually my next question is how was Iraq during that time technologically, educational-wise, their hospitals, their health care, was Iraq, would you say it was considered a third world country?
Oh no, by no means. It's useful to know, and of course you know this, that Iraq was a very wealthy country. They were in oil up to here, and the government was secular. The Ba'ath Party is a secular party founded by a Syrian Christian, Michel Aflaq, and so everybody was eligible to be involved with the growth of the country. They had all this money to spend, and they were spending it. And they spent it on the people, accomplishing things with that fund of money that America has had a much harder time doing. Education was free. Medical care was excellent. They had one of the highest standards of living and qualities of life in the Middle East. Very few countries were ahead of them. Roads and schools and housing and hospitals and water and electricity and all these things.
That was, you're kind of answering. You answer my next question whenever I ask you a question.
I'm sorry to be ahead.
No, that's okay because you're keeping me on track here. Now, the infrastructure back then, my next question was about electricity and water because right now people in Baghdad can't find water and electricity is only in some certain neighborhoods and not every day, where a lot of people now having to buy these electric generators, those who can afford it, and majority of Iraqis cannot afford it because of the economy. So compare the way people right now don't have water, no electricity, even in Baghdad, compare that to what's going on, what was happening back then and now.
Well, the contrast is really very, very severe because the Iraqis had benefited and were benefiting from this booming economy. Freedom of speech was limited, yes, but of course Iraq doesn't have a history of that anyway, so I'm not sure how many people missed it all that much. But you may remember that in the first Gulf War, the United States, destroyed the electrical power grid. That's one of the things you do in an outlet. And so that at that point, everything in Iraq started to go down very sharply. And there is on the web today, I can't cite it because I can't get at it right now, but there was a whole series of DIA documents which had become unclassified or declassified, which point out that the United States set out intentionally to make the economy much worse than it had been in the hope that this would encourage the Iraqi people to overthrow the government. And we have now admitted that openly. It's unfortunate, but an awful lot of people suffered an awfully bad life. And those things could not be repaired in the years prior to our invasion because there was the total embargo that the United Nations placed on Iraq for everything, as you may recall. So they could not repair the facilities that had been destroyed. And as a result, therefore, the Iraqis inherited an economy which had been sent down the drain, if you will, and which hasn't recovered yet because there's something resembling a civil war going on now.
Okay. Now, if I ask you any questions that you feel uncomfortable to answer, I know you're out of the service now, but I'm sure there's probably some lines that you can't cross or would not cross. But I wanted to ask you, did you guys have a pretty good idea of what was going on in Iraq as far as our intelligence? Did we have, like, the CIA was operating back then in Iraq, and you as an ambassador and a chief of mission, did you know everything you needed to know about Iraq and Iraq capabilities?
I have to tell you, it's really quite interesting. By one of those flukes, I had a staff of people working with me who were exceptionally gifted and capable. I had served with a couple of them before, but
CIA people?
Huh?
CIA people?
No, sir. I'm talking about the American diplomats. We had an exceptionally heavy percentage of people who spoke Arabic well. I mean, there are a lot of people who speak some Arabic, but I had Arabic speakers more than they had in embassies in Saudi Arabia and Jordan, although my operation was much, much smaller, just by happenstance.
Okay. Now, I'll tell you, the reason I asked that question, Ambassador Peck, because I wanted to know, did we know what Saddam was doing? Did we know his capabilities, his capacity to wage war? Did we have all that information back then?
Yes, sir. We had a pretty good handle on it.
Okay. So if we did, it's safe to assume that we even had better intelligence back in 2001 about Iraq, correct?
Well, it's tough to tell because when the relationships deteriorated, a lot of people came forward and offered us information that we hadn't had before. As the situation in Iraq got more and more difficult with the passage of time, and as a direct result of America's interest in getting rid of Saddam Hussein, things tightened up internally, just as they have in our own country, when the country perceives itself to be under greater threat. But we had reasonably good intelligence. Yes, we knew what he was doing and where he was doing from satellites, from radio intercepts, from people who told us things, and from an active U.S. intelligence operation as well.
Can you safely say that it was not a mistake that we mistaken Saddam to have weapons of mass destruction? In your opinion, you don't think that it was a mistake on our part?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
I'm afraid I don't. Too many of the inspectors also tried to tell us.
Okay, and also you did mention that Iraq was a secular country, which means that him and bin Laden would not even agree on anything.
Absolutely not.
Much less to have links with each other. Because as a matter of fact, bin Laden was a threat to Saddam, wasn't he?
Oh yes, and vice versa in a way. And they were certainly not in any way interested in working with or supporting each other. Quite the contrary, in fact, and would do whatever they could to injure the other party because their interests were almost diametrically opposed.
Okay, so the question is, what do you think the real reason? And let me add, before I ask you that question, let me add that Saddam, even under sanctions, did not deprive the United States of its oil. I have seen some statistics saying that we actually received 15% of our oil from Iraq, even when it was under siege. So he did not deprive us of oil. Why did we go and attack a sovereign country that did not have weapons of mass destruction, and we knew it did not have it, and did not have links to bin Laden, and we knew it did not have it, but yet we lied to the country, and we took the country to war on those two premises that we knew beforehand they were not true. Why did we go to war against Iraq?
Well, nobody has ever told me, but I'm able to make some guesses. I would assume, on the basis of what I understand about how this country works, that part of this grew out of a rage of a significant proportion of the American voting or active public over the fact that Iraq fired missiles into Israel in the early stages of the first Gulf War, and the idea was to punish Iraq for doing this and to make it clear to anybody who was watching that you don't do that to Israel because we don't like it. And so we took it upon ourselves, rightly or wrongly, that's a decision anybody can make, to ensure that everybody understood that we were not going to stand idly by while a country like Iraq launched missiles on Israel.
Now, that was back in 1991-92, right?
Yes, sir. Conveniently forgetting, as most Americans have, but most Iraqis have not, that in 1982, Israel bombed Baghdad.
Right.
So that rather than this being just a provocation out of thin air, you could call it, if you wish, a retaliation, because, hey, you guys bombed us, and now we're going to bomb you.
Okay. Now, if this is the case, and we set up the stage that we lied, or the president and the government lied. Now, on September 12th, 2001, George Tenet was going into the White House, and somebody was walking out, and that person was Richard Pearl. And Richard Pearl told George Tenet, Saddam or Iraq is going to have to pay for this. This was like a day after September 11th, when we did not even know who the heck, or supposedly did not know who did it. Have you had any contact with Richard Pearl or people like him in the government?
Oh, yes, I know Mr. Pearl. He and I know each other, I should say. We are not close friends, but it's important to remember that September the 11th came some years after the Iraq Liberation Act, which was passed following a letter that was sent to President Clinton by a number of activists. Richard Pearl was one of them, saying that we had to get Saddam Hussein. And the United States government passed what was called the Iraq Liberation Act, yes, which appropriated, as I recall the amount, something in the neighborhood of $94 million to finance groups dedicated to overthrowing Saddam Hussein. Now, that would be an act of war if anybody else had done it. I mean, we're going to finance, picture if Fidel Castro made an announcement like that. So we definitely set the stage for bad things, but we knew long before September the 11th that one of the things that we wanted to do was to get Saddam Hussein.
Okay, who wanted to do that?
September the 11th or not.
Who wanted to do that?
Very much convinced that that was something to do.
Who wanted to get rid of Saddam Hussein?
Well, the people who signed that letter to the president, I don't have the names in front of me.
Okay.
But it was a whole,
are we talking about people? Are we talking about people like Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas
Yes.
Feith, Richard Pearl?
Yes, sir.
From
I think also the whole flock of people. I can't.
Okay.
I was on a program. I was on
Now-
television.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, I want to concentrate on these people, and I wanted to see if when you were in the service, if these people or people like them were present around the president, and they were present in the government. How? I mean, we all know, we call them neocons now, but and people watching this show, they know who these people are, and they know what their where their heart sits at, and they know that they think of Israel first more than America first. So our viewers are very educated on who these people are. Were these people around when you were in the service?
Well, of course. I mean, this is. I think it's important for all of us to remember that in a democracy, people are allowed to gather together when they have shared views on things. This is what democracy is all about, and you let the people speak. So there is nothing inherently wrong with lobbies unless something is going wrong with the lobbies which have them operating in a view that other people think run counter to their own views. And it doesn't make anybody right or wrong. It really means that they have differing views.
Okay.
So in our government, there has always been, there always will be, an element of folks who reflect certain opinions. And the gentlemen that you have mentioned there, yes, do share certain orientations. Which
is that orientation, has it been out there for a long time, and is it growing?
What's that?
Is that orientation that you're talking about, has it been around our political systems for a while, and is that orientation getting stronger and bigger?
Yeah, I think it's getting stronger and bigger because of what happened with 9/11 and the sudden fear that we were facing, major problems with enemies that we did not understand and didn't know too well. And the people have played on those fears, whether they should or they shouldn't is not the issue, because they have. And so they're much stronger now than they were before. I don't think anybody can argue with that. It's a very prevalent opinion in this country that that our interest in and support for Israel's future and security is very much in America's interests.
Now, is it?
Well, that depends upon who you ask. In some respects, yes, I would say, and in other respects, I would say most definitely not. But it depends upon who you ask, because everybody has, I don't need to tell you this, so you know better than I do, that people have differing opinions on this kind of situation.
Now, just stay with that thought.
Widely different opinions.
Okay, stay with that thought for a second, because the next question is, these same people are very much have Israel at heart, and they have been pushing for Israel. They have been pushing for the Middle East to be transformed, where Israel will be the superpower in the region. And these people have a history in designing the Middle East. You know about the New American Century, the project for the New American Century, that these people and others of their orientation have basically designed or signed. And then you have another a document that was written by these same people while they were under Dick Cheney back in 1992. It was called the Defense Planning Guidance. And then in 96, they wrote the Clean Break Project for Securing the Realm, which all these three projects combined with a project that came out of Israel back in late 70s, early 80s, which was strategies for Israel in the 1980s, where they have taken every Arab country and said the only way we are going to win the war with our enemies, the Arabs, is if we work on these fault lines within each society. And they had actually defined the fault lines in Iraq being removing Saddam Hussein, inflaming sectarian violence will end up dividing the country. And as you know, that's exactly what is happening right now in Iraq. Are these people, do you think they have pushed the United States to war against Iraq for Israel?
Well, you know, I find myself just a little bit uncomfortable with your constant reference to these people. That's the sort of phrase that doesn't go over too well with me, because I recognize that these folks have, let's be honest, differing opinions than my own. But because of my awareness, which you share, I'm certain, because of my awareness that this is the way the system theoretically is supposed to work, I can't make any terribly unpleasant noises about it, because you have a pharmaceutical lobby, you have an automobile lobby, you have an oil company lobby. People are allowed to have lobbies. That is not the problem. My concern, and perhaps yours as well, comes about when the interests of the lobby no longer, in my mind, intersect those of the United States. And then I have a problem with that.
Okay.
And right now, it seems very clear to me that some of the machinery that is driving our involvement in Iraq and with the Middle East is unfortunately reflective of a very hostile situation that people would like to see developing between us, the United States of America, and the people of the Middle East, especially those of a Muslim persuasion. And there's a bunch of them out there.
So you don't have any problem with people using the system if they have the money to buy the best government money can buy. You mentioned.
I have a big problem with it, sir. I have a big problem with it. What I don't like is when it begins to slide over into, I guess we have to use the phrase advisedly, when it begins to slide over into racial or religious issues, then I get uncomfortable.
Okay. I mean, does it matter that people, you call them of that orientation, is that how, I mean, I'm just trying to find out, is that how the system works? I mean, let's say if the Arabs or if the Chinese would start dumping millions of dollars into our politicians' pockets to basically buy their votes in Congress, well, that's lobbying too. And it seems to me that they will be using the system, and there's nothing illegal about it. So the system is there to be used. So what difference does it make if they're Muslims, if they're Jews, if they're Christians, if they're? It doesn't matter. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no, you don't want to take me that far on it, because of course, just like you, I have some deep concerns about some of the things that do happen. And, strongly held beliefs that some of the things that do happen in the field of buying votes is not only unfortunate, but is dangerous. And I think that you would agree with me there. But it's the characterization that you employed of these people. I mean, these people are some of the folks who are entitled. These are Americans who are entitled to have their views and to share them. What I don't like about that particular approach is the willingness of folks on the other side of the issue to endeavor to silence those who want to speak out in support of a differing position. That makes me extremely uncomfortable.
And who's trying to silence those with a different position?
Oh, I suppose you could say that it's just about everybody who doesn't. You could take a simpler matter, one that is perhaps. How would you do this? You'd say something like the abortion question. There are those, you're aware of them, who will go out, and bomb an abortion clinic because they think abortion is wrong and that nobody else should be allowed to have it. Now, I think that flies in the face of our principles. So there are many, many instances in which I'm sure you and I would agree totally that what is being done is wrong, and does not reflect what our country is all about. In the case of the pro-Israel lobby, which includes people of every political and racial stripe and every religious coloration, they are certainly allowed to be in favor of a strong linkage to the state of Israel.
Okay, was the interest of America served best with this war against Iraq?
Absolutely not.
Okay, but it did serve. Now, would you think? I'm sure you will agree that it did serve. Taking Saddam out of the formula and reducing Iraq into 3 fighting states would serve the benefits of Israel, correct?
Well, okay, now, here's the answer. I don't think it would serve the interests of Israel, certainly not in the long run. But there are probably people around who think that I'm wrong and say, oh, yes, that would help them a lot.
So, I mean, theoretically speaking, if you get rid of one of my enemies, then I'm better off. The less enemies I have, that would be more beneficial to me, right?
Unless you spread through the region the seeds of a far worse problem than the ones which you have now.
Well, they probably miscalculated, or that was the design for this whole thing.
Current issues.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That can happen in the finest of homes.
Okay, so to me, these people with the orientation, you said with the same orientations, to me, their best heart was not in the United States, but it was overseas. The United States came second because there's nothing in this war that is good for us as Americans.
Yes, there is nothing in this war that is good for us as Americans.
Okay, so the people who pushed for this war, that's where me and you were crossing the lines here, that if my interest, if the interest of the United States is the #1 interest, and lobbyists should not be lobbying for foreign governments. It's against the law, correct?
Well, that there are registered agents who lobby for all kinds of foreign governments. They're certainly allowed to do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they have to be foreign. They have to be considered as foreign agents.
Yes.
They could not be considered Americans and lobby for China.
Yes, and you can have former senators who lobby for Turkey, for Morocco, for Indonesia.
But I mean,
you hire a public relations firm.
Okay. Now, let's go to AIPAC here for a second. AIPAC is sending 19 congressmen to visit Israel this month, or I think in September, probably either August or September. And this is not the first time that AIPAC sends congressmen and presidential candidates take trips to Israel. What the heck is going on? Why before they have to announce they have to visit Israel? Can you explain that to me?
Oh, certainly. There's a very, very powerful voter bloc that is deeply concerned about our relationships with Israel. And they feel very strongly that they should have congressmen and others go over there to see what they consider to be important. And that's been going on now for such a long time. And because if you're going to run for Congress, you're going to want to get votes. And one of the ways you get votes is to indicate to anybody who wants to look that you are in favor of good, strong, powerful, ongoing relations with Israel, because there are a lot of people out there who will support you. The system works like that. I don't say it's good, I don't say it's bad, but that's the way it is. Ireland is the same way.
Now, did you guys? Now, let me ask you more of a personal question. When you were in the diplomatic channels, did you and others kind of talked like, I guess I don't want to say in secret, but maybe like in personal conversations that something is wrong, it can't keep on this pressure that this particular group is putting on the government? Did you, as a diplomat, did you ever talk to this about other people? With other people?
Yeah. Oh, sure. We talk about all kinds of things, in the privacies of our own homes. And you are allowed, I guess that's the word we would have to use here, you are allowed to question policies in channels. You may not be aware of this because not many folks are, but the Foreign Service of the United States, the diplomats, for 30-some years now, have given awards and recognition to people who have stood up and challenged the system. This is one of the things that you're supposed to be able to do, to say, excuse me, boss, this may not be a very good idea for the following reasons. And the boss doesn't have to listen. But the American Foreign Service Association encourages and rewards people who do this because we think that's an important aspect of the job.
And I'm sure people who stood up and questioned probably found themselves serving in Tanzania, probably.
Well, I'm one of those people. I've received an award from the State Department for standing up and challenging the system, and survived and had a reason to be successful. Very pleasant career. It always depends upon how you do it. You can't go running up and down the streets of the city bellowing and snorting that things that something is bad. That you have to work within the system.
Okay.
And if you do that, the system says, okay, that's okay to do it like that. You don't go to the press. You don't leak it to the media. You just talk to your bosses and say, hey, you need to think about this.
Okay. Ed, stay with me. We're going to go to the phones. We have callers waiting. Let's go to Rick on line 1. Go ahead, Rick.
Yes, Doctor. I don't want to take you off course here, but I do want to ask the ambassador one quick question. What he thinks about the USS Liberty attack. If you can go into a quick detail of why we haven't heard anything about this. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Did you hear the question?
I could not hear him. No, sir.
Okay.
Very, very faint. I don't know why.
Okay. He wanted to know if he wanted to know what you think about the USS Liberty attack. How come we have not heard much about it lately?
Well, that's probably one of the most difficult questions to answer. I have had the good fortune to be involved a little bit on the edges with some of the Liberty incidents. And, to answer his question, recognizing that I'm talking to an awful lot of people in the audience who may not ever have heard of the Liberty incident.
Most of them did. We did quite a bit of. Yes, most of them. Our viewers, they know.
Okay, well, you figure your audience does know. That is something that I have never been able to explain or understand why it happened the way it happened and why it didn't happen the way it should have happened. It's just an inexplicable travesty of all of the things that I believe Americans should know about and understand. That has got to be probably one of the worst ones of all. Why it was that ship was attacked, destroyed, with 70% of the crew killed or wounded, and nothing has ever happened about it. I find that just an abomination.
Did you ever talk about this while you were at the State Department?
At the State Department, not so much, no, but recently I've been involved in some activities to get people to understand a little bit better what it is that happened and didn't happen in the case of the Liberty situation. But it has always had an unpleasant, I have to use an unpleasant odor. It comes across to me as something that is clearly unclean and should have been straightened up years ago, but unfortunately never has been.
Well, okay, just for the benefit of if we have one or two of our viewers who don't know what the USS Liberty is, it's an American ship that was attacked by Israel back in 1967 during the Six-Day War, where American sailors have died and many were wounded, and there was a huge cover-up. Would you say it was cover-up by the government?
I am forced to say that yes, it certainly does look like.
Now, the question is, how could a country as small as Israel, with only 5 million people, and as tiny as it is, have so much influence and control over United States policies and, I might add, Congress and government?
Well, because they have a group of people. Some of them are organized, some of them are not, who spend a great deal of time and effort looking out for and supporting what they consider to be the important aspects of our relationships with that country, and they'll work very actively to advance the cause, I guess you'd have to say, and they do a tremendously effective job of it. Whether that's good or bad is a judgment call that you have to make on your own, but it certainly is fairly evident to me that they do care. They are concerned, and they will do whatever they think is useful and necessary to advance Israel's interests.
What do you think, we have a few more minutes left, what do you think of these presidential candidates saying stuff like, for instance, Obama said that he will attack Pakistan, and let me call him the idiot from Colorado, I think, Tankero or something, when he said that he will, in 2005, he said he would nuke Mecca, and then a couple of days ago he said again he would destroy Mecca. So
yeah, that puts him in the category of someone who needs cold compresses applied to his forehead, I think, on an hourly basis. Because, just taking it from the simplest point of view, on the basis of what he has said, which sounds idiotic to me, because they knocked down the trade towers, that, applying his logic, would lead those other countries...
Who's they? Who's they knocked out the Twin Towers?
Huh?
You said when they knocked out the Twin Towers. Who are you referring to as they?
When the Twin Towers were bombed and destroyed.
Yeah, but you said when they knocked out the Twin Towers. Who are you referring to? Who is they?
Whoever they are.
So we don't know.
Point. Well, we supposedly do. My point is that if you apply the same logic that this idiot is doing, then in theory we should have never done anything to retaliate. Because that's what he is saying. If we bomb Mecca, then they'll leave us alone. No, that isn't the way those things work, you strange fellow. That's the point I was trying to make. That this provokes more rather than reducing it, even if you think that the chap is making any sense, and I don't think he is.
That was
It
Tom.
does not work that way. That's not real world.
Yeah, that was presidential candidate Congressman Tom Tancredo of Colorado, who said that. And then with Obama saying that he will go and invade Pakistan, that was not a wise thing to say either, was it?
No, I think it's kind of interesting that in the case of Tancredo, if you saw that, even the State Department, which is not famous for this kind of stuff, has called it a ridiculous, idiotic idea. Distancing, how often do they do that in terms of a political campaign? That's very compelling that they did that.
Ambassador, we have established in the beginning of the show that the government knew better than, they had the information and they had the knowledge that Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam did not have links to Al-Qaeda, but they decided to use that because that was what would put the American people, especially coming out of 9/11, on board to attack Iraq. Now, I understand governments would have to use propaganda to go around to accomplish whatever they're after. What about the media? Why did the media go the same route? And I'm sure if we are on this TV station right here in Lafayette, Louisiana, from the beginning we were saying this is wrong. The information you're getting is wrong. Saddam does not have weapons of mass destruction. Saddam does not have links to 9/11. If we knew it, I'm sure other people in the media knew it, but they decided to go along with the government story. Why?
I think it would be safe to say that it's because they are in the business of making money. And if you want to make money in today's America, you have to wind up a certain portion of the time telling people what you think they want to hear. And you do not want to tell them things that they don't want to hear, because then they'll stop advertising and buying the paper. It's one of the disadvantages of, if you will, the capitalist system, because money is the drives the machinery, and there shouldn't be any question about that in anyone's mind. And so,
is that the same money? Is that the same money that was driving the lobby?
Well, it's that money and other money, because people, let's be honest. Can we go that far on your show? Let's be honest. Most Americans, I describe myself as a Middle East expert because, unlike most Americans, I know where it is. Americans don't pay a great deal of attention. We have 4 time zones in this country. We have 2 borders. Brazil has a border with every country in South America except 2. And we have these huge oceans that separate us from the rest of the world, and we're rich, and we're fat, and we're happy, and we're powerful, and we're strong, and we're fearless. And so trying to get Americans to focus on, for example, what's happening in the occupied territories. I think you could walk out into the streets even where you live and find an awful lot of people who would not really know what you're talking about, what occupied territories.
Right.
You and I would know. I don't think the rest of the country does. And when you do start to talk about it, they say, no, it's not like that at all, because they know better. And they don't know any worse because nobody's telling them anything. I've been out there in the West Bank. I was an observer in Gaza a year ago, January, for the parliamentary elections there. And I've been to the West Bank and London. I see what's happening there, and I come to talk to people about that in this country. And they either throw me out or they just say they write me off as some kind of nutcase, because they don't know anything about what I know, what you may know, and nobody's going to tell them about it. The media won't touch it.
Okay.
So there is a very long answer to a very short and important question.
Well, I'm going to still continue with that same question. Do you think there was a collusion of some sort here between the media or a cooperation on this particular project, i.e. the war on Iraq, between some certain elements in the media and certain elements in the government, which we call neocons?
I would not be the least bit surprised. Frankly, it's a very popular position in our country to support the sorts of things that the neocons are interested in. It's a very prevalent position, and you and I have probably had some interesting experiences trying to talk to people who should know better, but don't seem to be interested in learning. And I don't know what you do about that, because I've talked to friends of long standing and had them get very upset with me because the things that I'm telling them fly in the face of what they think they already know. And you can't talk to people about that sort of thing very easily because their minds shut down. It's called cognitive dissonance, I think is the word that sociologists use. They just do not want to hear about it.
Okay.
And consequently, they won't.
Okay. Now, let's get back to Iraq.
Why not?
Is there a best solution for what is going on in Iraq now? As you know, the Sunnis left the government. Yesterday, the Iyad Alawi group did not attend the meetings. So basically, we don't even have a functioning government in Iraq. What is and a lot of people saying, let's get the troops out. It's like we broke it and we don't even want to fix it. Is there a fix for Iraq?
No. You're asking me my opinion, and I'll give it to you straight. We have relearned, we are relearning, and we are teaching the rest of the world the true meaning of the word quagmire. If we leave Iraq, it is a sure, certain, and unavoidable catastrophe. If we stay in Iraq, it's a different, sure, certain, and unavoidable catastrophe. That's why you call it a quagmire. That's why you don't go there, because there isn't any way out, simple, neat, and clean. Much as you'd like to find one, you can't, because it's not there. And so if you stay, if you go, whatever you do, it's going to be a disaster. Now, if you ask me, I would tell you that it's better on balance to get out, because then, at a minimum, we will stop killing them and they will stop killing us. But You cannot do anything. There is no right step now. It is much too late. Much too late to just walk away and have it all work out. You mentioned partition. I would like to call your attention to the fact that partition is something that the imperialists did. And look how well partition has worked out in Cyprus, in Kashmir, in Palestine, in Northern Ireland. It's a sure... People start killing each other when you partition. And if you're going to partition Iraq into a Kurdish, and the Turks won't let you, and a Sunni and a Shia area, what happens to the Yazidis? Where do the Turkmen go? What about the Sabaeans? What about the Christians?
Well, that's exactly what this Mossad document said back in 1982. That this will happen. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I understand that. And you and I, but your question was, what do you do about Iraq?
Yeah, no, that was like an afterthought.
No, it's, you wish, yes, this is what we could, this would solve the problem. And here we stand, soggy with what you could only describe as galactic proportions of hypocrisy, telling that poor guy Al-Alawi how he has to run his country after we have shattered it into pieces and destroyed everything that it was. It was secular. It ain't going to be any more. Women were liberated. They're not going to be any more. The country was booming economically. It's not going to be any more. The schools and all this stuff, it's gone. It's finished. It's gone. And above all else, my friend, we have fixed it so Iraq can no longer stand in the way of potential Iranian expansion. We have stamped that country into the dirt. There is nothing left. You've got to get out.
Iraq was our first line of defense against Iran, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it was, and we took care of that as well. I mean, we've done just about everything. I once spoke
now, Ambassador, they knew this. I mean, everybody in the government knew exactly this is what's going to happen. They knew exactly what will happen when that takes place. And yet they still did it, knowing what will happen to the United States economically, socially. As we know, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq. And just imagine what their families are doing here and the hardship that their families are going. So we screw up our society. We spent almost $2 trillion, it will be. And so this was not in the least a benefit for the United States, none whatsoever. And those who designed this, they knew it, but did not care because they wanted to accomplish something else. And in my opinion, which you did not agree with me, that it was for the benefit of Israel.
Well, okay, now, see, when you say it's for the benefit of Israel, I think their perception is totally wrong. I think it's a catastrophe for Israel down the road somewhere. But an awful lot of people in my country, in our country, tend to look at the short term. This is why we have trouble in a place like Iraq. We're not interested in the long term. That's why we have one of the world's highest, credit debts.
Okay.
Because people want it now. They don't want to wait for it. They want it now. And don't bother me with talking about how it might be X years down the road, because I don't care.
Okay. Ed, unfortunately, we are out of time, but you're going to promise me that you will be back here soon.
Well, it's an interesting experience talking with you, and I recognize that I may have disappointed you in some ways by not saying specifically certain things you wanted to say.
Not at all. You are a diplomat. What do you expect?
No, but I'm a thinking diplomat, and it's not out of fear that I don't say these things. I mean, I'm long past being afraid of
Very
that.
good.
We're
going to have to leave it. We're going to have to leave it at that, as we are completely out of time. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, sir.
Thanks. Goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Hi, I'm Rose Hoffman Cormier, Health Information Center Coordinator of the Women's Foundation. The Women's Foundation is a local, private, nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting health and well-being to women and their families. The Women's Foundation has various areas that they help people. We have a Health Information Center, which is a video pamphlet library on health and wellness issues for women and their families. And we do have